In the Middle Ages, Europe's strongest power was not a kingdom. It had no king, no capital, no single army. Instead, it was a web of small cities. Lübeck, Hamburg, Bremen, Danzig, Riga, Tallinn, Bruges. Most were tiny beside France, England, or the Holy Roman Empire. Yet together, they could starve kings, bankrupt rivals, and dominate Northern Europe's trade. They called this network the Hanseatic League. For centuries, its merchants ruled the cold waters of the Baltic and North Seas. So how did scattered ports become Europe's first commercial superpower? And why did this remarkable league eventually lose to the very states it helped enrich? Start with the map. Northern Europe was difficult, wet, dangerous, and surprisingly perfect for trade. The Baltic Sea linked forests, rivers, islands, and distant coastlines. From the east came grain, timber, wax, fur, amber, and tar. From Scandinavia came iron, copper, fish, and more timber.
From the west came cloth, salt, wine, spices, and silver. The problem was moving any of it safely. Roads were terrible. Forests hid bandits. Borders meant tolls, and every local ruler wanted a cut. A merchant might cross 5 lordships before lunchtime. Then pirates could take everything by sunset. So merchants needed protection. Not noble protection, reliable protection. They needed friends in other ports, trusted warehouses, legal privileges, and armed ships. They needed a system. And northern German cities were ready to build one. The first great advantage was geography. Lübeck sat near the narrow land bridge between 2 seas. Goods from the North Sea could cross toward the Baltic. Goods from the Baltic could move toward Western Europe. Lübeck was not huge. It was simply in the right place. In history, that can be enough. During the 12th century, German settlers and merchants moved eastward. New towns appeared along the Baltic coast. Many adopted similar laws, customs, weights, and trading habits. That mattered more than it sounds. If merchants knew the rules in one city, business became easier elsewhere. A trader from Lübeck could arrive in Riga or Danzig. He would find familiar legal traditions and commercial contacts. The map was becoming connected before anyone called it a league. Then came the first big deal. Lübeck and Hamburg made an agreement in the 13th century. Lübeck focused on Baltic trade. Hamburg faced the North Sea and routes toward England. Together, they linked 2 commercial worlds. That alliance was practical, not romantic. Merchants rarely need grand speeches. They need safe cargo and predictable profit. Soon other cities joined similar arrangements. They exchanged information, defended privileges, and supported each other abroad. A city did not need to conquer territory. It only needed access to markets. That was the Hanseatic trick. Traditional empires expanded by taking land. The Hansa expanded by taking connections. It built a commercial empire without painting entire continents one color. Instead, it placed hubs at strategic bottlenecks. In London, Hanseatic merchants gained a trading base called the Steel Yard. In Bruges, they entered the wealthy cloth markets of Flanders. In Bergen, they controlled much of the stockfish trade. In Novgorod, they connected Western merchants to the Russian interior. These were not colonies in the later imperial sense. They were privileged commercial enclaves. Warehouses, offices, churches, rules, and guarded compounds. Small pieces of one trading world planted inside another. Imagine a medieval merchant network with its own international operating system. That is closer to the truth. The League's merchants carried essential goods, and essential goods create leverage. Take salt. Without refrigeration, salt preserved food. Fish could be packed, stored, shipped, and eaten months later. Salt made distant fishing grounds profitable. It turned herring into a geopolitical weapon. Now take grain. Cities needed bread. Armies needed bread. Kingdoms needed bread. A failed harvest could turn markets into panic. The Baltic region became one of Europe's major grain suppliers. Hanseatic ships moved that grain westward. The lead did not merely sell luxuries. It moved the basics that kept societies functioning.
And when you control basics, powerful people suddenly return your letters. The herring trade was especially ridiculous. For a time, enormous herring shoals appeared near Scania, in southern Scandinavia. Fishing villages became crowded international marketplaces. Merchants rushed in with barrels, salt, credit, ships, and workers. Herring was everywhere. Then the shoal shifted. Just like that, a giant economic center lost its advantage. Nature had changed the business plan. Medieval commerce was not calm. It was a high-stakes game against weather, war, disease, and fish.
Still, the League kept growing. By the 14th century, it connected roughly 200 cities. Not every city participated equally. Some were powerful leaders, others were occasional partners. Lübeck became the informal center, but it was never a true capital. That was both the League's genius and its weakness. No king could easily seize it. No single defeat could immediately destroy it. But agreement was always difficult. Every city wanted profit. Every city had local enemies. Every city thought another city should pay more. In other words, it was a coalition. And coalitions are wonderful until the bill arrives. The League's merchants were not helpless civilians. Their cities built ships, hired guards, and sometimes went to war. When Danish King Valdemar IV threatened Hanseatic interests, the League responded hard. He had attacked and looted Visby, a major Baltic trading center. That alarmed merchants across the region.
If a king could seize one city's goods, no port was safe. So the League organized a coalition. Hanseatic cities and their allies fought Denmark. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Stralsund. Denmark was forced to grant major trading privileges. For a remarkable moment, merchants had beaten a king. Not through one national army, through money, ships, coordination, and the fear of lost trade. That victory showed Europe something new. A network could act like a state. It could negotiate. It could blockade. It could punish. It could even shape who prospered around the Baltic. But the League had a secret vulnerability. It was powerful because trade crossed borders. It became vulnerable when states learned to control those borders better. At first, kings often welcomed Hanseatic merchants. They brought ships, taxes, goods, and expertise. But rulers slowly realized something awkward. Foreign traders were making fortunes inside their realms.
They received special rights, guarded compounds, and favorable rules. Local merchants did not always enjoy that arrangement. Neither did ambitious monarchs. England wanted more control over English trade. The Dutch wanted more control over Dutch shipping. Scandinavian rulers wanted greater authority over their own ports. And Russia had its own ideas about Novgorod. The League's success created competitors. Worse, it trained them. The Dutch learned how to move bulk goods efficiently. They developed cheaper shipping and stronger commercial institutions. Amsterdam rose as a new powerhouse. It could connect the Baltic to Western markets with greater scale. The Dutch had a major advantage. Their country was compact. Their interests were focused. The Hanseatic League was spread across dozens of cities. Its merchants could cooperate, but they could also argue for years. The map was changing again. The League had thrived in the fragmented Northern Europe. Now, larger states were becoming more organized. They collected taxes, built navies, standardized laws, and protected national merchants. A city league could outmaneuver a weak king. It struggled against a growing modern state. Then came internal stress. The Black Death devastated Europe during the 14th century. Trade survived, but populations collapsed. Labor became scarcer. Wages rose. Old social arrangements weakened. Cities faced unrest and financial pressure. At the same time, trade routes shifted. Atlantic commerce became more important after European voyages across the ocean. The Baltic still mattered greatly, but it was no longer the whole story. The center of Europe's commercial gravity was moving west. The Hansa had built its wealth around northern seas. Now the ocean itself was becoming the bigger prize. Portugal, Spain, England, and the Dutch Republic looked outward. They sought routes around Africa, across the Atlantic, and into Asia.
The League's warehouses could not easily follow. Its structure was made for regional trade. It was excellent at managing the sea full of rival ports. It was less suited to global empires. Then, political change hit the Eastern network. Novgorod had been one of the League's crucial trading posts. It opened routes to furs, wax, and Eastern goods. But Moscow expanded. In the late 15th century, Muscovy absorbed Novgorod. The Hanseatic position there became less secure. Eventually, the old trading post was closed. One door in the network had slammed shut. And that is the problem with a network. It can root around small damage, but lose enough hubs and the whole system weakens. The League also lacked a permanent central government. Its meetings, called Hansatags, required consensus. That sounds sensible. Until merchants from distant cities must agree during a crisis. Some cities wanted war. Others wanted compromise. Some depended on one market, others depended on another. Lübeck could lead, but it could not command. The League had influence without full authority. That worked during expansion. During decline, it became painfully slow. A rival could make one decision. The Hansa needed everybody to stop arguing, and everybody rarely did. The English challenge became especially serious. Hanseatic merchants had long enjoyed special privileges in London, but English merchants wanted access to the same opportunities. English rulers also wanted more revenue and control. Conflicts erupted. The League even fought England during the 15th century. It won concessions, briefly, but the victory did not solve the deeper problem. England was becoming more centralized and more maritime. Its rulers could build a national strategy. The Hansa could only defend an old arrangement. Old arrangements usually lose eventually. Meanwhile, the Dutch were winning with efficiency. Their ships were often cheaper to operate. Their merchants were flexible. Their financial system was increasingly sophisticated, and they were positioned to dominate the same Baltic trade. The Dutch did not need to destroy the Hanseatic League dramatically. They could simply offer a better deal. That is a very dangerous kind of enemy. A cannon can sink a ship. A lower shipping cost can sink an entire commercial order. By the 16th century, Hanseatic influence was fading. The League still existed. Its cities still traded. Its name still carried prestige. But the old network no longer controlled Northern Europe's commercial pulse. New states and new merchant powers had taken the lead. The final gathering of the Hanseatic League came in the 17th century. It did not end with one gigantic battle. There was no final emperor surrendering a crown. It simply became less necessary. Its members went their separate ways. That quiet ending fits the League perfectly. It had never been a conventional empire, so it did not collapse like one. It faded like an old trade route. First, fewer ships arrive. Then, warehouses stand emptier. Then, a privilege expires. Then, another port becomes cheaper. And eventually, the map has moved on. But the Hanseatic League left a huge legacy. It helped develop commercial law across Northern Europe. It spread shared standards, contracts, credit networks, and urban connections. It linked distant regions long before railways or modern nations. It proved that cities could become geopolitical actors. It also helped shape the rise of ports that remain important today. Hamburg is still one of Europe's major gateways. Bremen still carries its maritime identity. Gdansk still stands on the Baltic as a historic trading city. Tallinn, Riga, and Lübeck still show traces of that shared world. Even the old Hanseatic idea survives in names and institutions. Cities still celebrate their Hanseatic past. Why? Because it was an extraordinary solution to a medieval problem. Small cities could not overpower great kingdoms alone, so they built something different. They built trust across distance. They built rules across borders. They built strength from interdependence. Of course, trust was never perfect. Merchants cheated, cities quarreled, rivals complained. This was not a golden age without conflict. It was a hard commercial system in a hard world. But it worked remarkably well. For centuries, a merchant in one small city could depend on partners far away. That confidence turned ships into supply chains. Supply chains turned ports into powers. And power changed the map. So did the Hanseatic League really become Europe's first superpower? Not in the usual sense. It did not rule millions through one throne. It did not march across Europe under one flag. Its power was stranger than that. It ruled routes, markets, privileges, and information.
It made kings negotiate with towns. It connected distant coasts into one economic zone. And it showed that the smallest places can become enormous. They just need the right geography, the right goods, and enough allies. The Hanseatic League did not conquer Europe. It made Europe depend on it. For a while, that was even more powerful.